You ever been scrolling online and you see a question that just stops you in your tracks, one that feels so relatable? Well, we're going to talk about one of those today, a paradox that affects millions of people but is just so deeply misunderstood. Okay, let's get into it. It all starts with this really simple, kind of blunt question from a popular Reddit thread. And it's a question a lot of us have probably asked, right? Either about ourselves on a lazy Sunday or maybe about someone we know. Why is it that sometimes the less you do, the more exhausted you feel? And then you see a reply like this, and it just hits. It's this perfect, vicious cycle that feels impossible to escape. This was one of the top comments, and you can see why. It perfectly captures that feeling of being completely stuck. And if you keep scrolling, you see all the usual suspects, right? Depression, a bad diet, not enough exercise, a messy sleep schedule. Some people even chalk it up to just being lazy. And look, for a lot of people, these things are totally valid, but they are not the whole story. What if we've been looking at this completely backwards? What if, for millions of people out there, this deep, unshakable tiredness has nothing to do with a character flaw or just needing to get more motivated? What if that exhaustion is actually the main symptom of a serious, incredibly complex biological illness, one that goes way beyond just feeling tired? That is exactly what we need to unpack. And this brings us to a much deeper diagnosis. We're talking about a condition called myalgic encephalomyelitis, but it's more commonly known as chronic fatigue syndrome, or just ME/CS. So what is ME/CFS exactly? Well, the clinical definition tells us it's a disabling long-term illness. But the key phrase here is profound fatigue that doesn't improve with rest. This is not the kind of tired you can just sleep off over a weekend. It's relentless and it's debilitating. Now, this is maybe the most important thing to get. ME/CFS is a biological disease. It is not a psychological condition. Researchers have found real, measurable changes in a person's nervous system, their immune system, and even in how their body produces energy at a cellular level. It is not all in your head. And that brings us to the hallmark symptom, the one thing that truly separates ME/CFS from just being tired. It's a phenomenon called post-exertional malaise, or PEM. In simple terms, it means that after even a tiny bit of effort, physical or mental, all of your symptoms get dramatically worse. So what does that actually look like? Well, people call it a crash. It can be triggered by something as normal as taking a shower or doing a quick grocery run. But the reaction isn't immediate. It often hits a day or two later. And it's not just about feeling more tired. It's a full-body shutdown with flu-like symptoms, pain, and a recovery that can take days, weeks, or sometimes even longer. Okay, so for a doctor to actually diagnose this, they're looking for 4 core things. First, that debilitating fatigue we talked about. Second, that signature post-exertional malaise. Third is unrefreshing sleep, where you wake up feeling like you haven't slept at all. And fourth, cognitive issues, what a lot of people call brain fog, trouble with memory or finding the right words. Now that we have a better grip on what this illness is, let's talk about the real-world impact it has, because the cost is just staggering. Just let this number sink in for a second. 25%. 1/4 of all people with ME/CFS are so sick that they're confined to their homes or even to their beds. That's an enormous number of people whose lives have been put on hold by this illness. And to put that in perspective, this is really eye-opening. When researchers measured quality of life and day-to-day function, they found that ME/CFS can be more debilitating than other really serious chronic conditions, like multiple sclerosis or even heart disease. It's also a spectrum. Someone with mild ME/CFS might be able to work, but then they have to spend every other ounce of energy just recovering. No social life, no hobbies. On the other end of that spectrum, very severe means being completely bedbound, sometimes needing a feeding tube and requiring around-the-clock care. And on top of all the physical symptoms, living with ME/CFS means fighting this constant, uphill battle against disbelief and misunderstanding. And that just makes everything so much harder. So let's circle all the way back to where we started. You see the common ideas from that Reddit thread on the left and the scientific reality on the right. Telling someone with this illness to just push through it or get more exercise isn't just wrong. It's actively harmful advice. For them, exertion literally makes the disease worse. And what's really tragic is that this disbelief doesn't just come from the public. So many patients say their own doctors are dismissive or just don't know anything about the illness. This can lead to years, sometimes decades of suffering without a diagnosis, all while they just get sicker. Well, that lack of understanding leads directly to this, a huge gap in research funding. A disease like multiple sclerosis, which affects a similar number of people, gets about 20 times more research funding than ME/CFS, and that gap is a big reason why we still don't have a cure or even any approved treatments. So, what's the bottom line here? When you see someone who does nothing all day but seems totally exhausted, you might just be seeing the very tip of an iceberg. Because underneath that surface, they could be fighting a massive, invisible biological war inside their own body every single day. And that kind of leaves us with one big question, doesn't it? If so many of us can get this one so wrong, what else are we misjudging? It's a really powerful reminder to try and approach the things we don't understand with a little less judgment and a lot more curiosity.